Peter Welch of Vermont. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Martin.
Mr. Welch, the president yesterday urged House Majority Leader Eric Cantor to put his jobs bill up for a vote so that the entire country would know where every member of the Congress stands. But Mr. Cantor has already said that he won't do it. Why? If over half the country wants the bill to be enacted, why doesn't Mr. Cantor put the bill to the House?
Well, that's a very good question. You know, the best analogy is Senator McConnell, who, as the leader in the Republicans in the Senate, said his job was to guarantee that Barack Obama was a one-term president. And obviously, the job of any of us in the House or the Senate is to try to help America succeed. And in fact, if there's going to be accountability when a president has a major bill, I think each one of us in Congress should be willing to vote on it, yes or no, and then let voters hold us accountable. We can take a different point of view, but let's move on, say where we stand, and vote. Mr. Cantor, I think, has doubled down on this notion that if government is dysfunctional here, which is what it is now, we're not making decisions, we're not acting. It's not just divided government, it's dysfunctional government. That the disgust that Americans feel about this institution not working for them redounds to the benefit of his electoral prospects.
And yet, despite Mr. Cantor's belligerence, some Republicans are beginning to question his approach. Let's hear what Congressman Frank Wolf had to say on that tax pledge signed by so many Republicans.
Have we really reached a point where one person's demand for ideological purity is paralyzing Congress to the point that even a discussion of tax reform is viewed as breaking a no-tax pledge?
Are you beginning to see cracks in Mr. Cantor's armor here? And how can you appeal to people like Mr. Wolf?
Well, thank you, Mr. Wolf. I mean, bottom line, this is not rocket science. What we Americans know we have to do is Democrats have to be willing to make some cuts, and the Republicans have to be willing to come up with some revenues. You know, the revenue base in this country is about 15% right now. It's the lowest taxes we've had since basically the Eisenhower years. And historically, they're in the 18 to 19% range. So that has to be part of the solution. So this ideological purity as a substitute for practical problem solving is really threatening to this country. And we need more folks like Mr. Wolf. There's a lot of good Republicans there, but they've got to crack that leadership mold.
But Congressman Welch, you said earlier that Mr. McConnell had made it his single focus to get one man out of a job, the president. Right. Are you telling me that Mr. McConnell has no regard for the 14 million who are out of work at the moment? Well, is it really the case that getting the president out has precedence over the 14 million Americans desperate to work?
Well, that's certainly not my view, and it's certainly not the view of those 14 million Americans. But I'm quoting Senator McConnell. I mean, that's, in fact, a shocking thing to say. You know, we have our fights. The election comes up. It's no holds barred, and the voters make the decision about who's going to be the majority, who's going to be the minority. But when you get elected, whether you're a leader, whether you're rank and file, your job is to try to help America succeed. And you can express your differences, but the idea that you're going to fight for failure, that's essentially what your agenda is going to be, and justify that by saying that we bring it down to the ashes, and then when we are fully in charge, we'll rescue it. I mean, that obviously is quite anti-democratic.
It's horrendous. I'd like you to listen to one more piece of sound, this time from New York Senator Charles Schumer, who came out with harsh criticism of Republicans who may not be playing the game fairly. Take a listen to this.
Mr. President, the shocking truth is that our Republican colleagues seem to be willing to tank the economy simply to help out the very most privileged who are already doing well.
Do you agree with Mr. Schumer?
I do. You know, we did a lot of damage here with this brinksmanship on the debt ceiling. I mean, essentially what happened was that Mr. McConnell, Mr. Cantor, used the obligation that America has to pay its bills. We've always done that, whether those bills were incurred by Republican or Democratic administrations. We always pay our bills. They used that as a hostage to get their way on another budget deal. And we were so much and so close to the brink that it really destabilized confidence that we're going to get it right. And that is a brinksmanship where we've gone too far. You know, you use leverage in politics or negotiation, but at a certain point, restraint is the virtue that's required for the good of our country.
It's interesting, isn't it, that as the Congress has become obstructionist, business is just carrying on. You've been quite a vocal critic about the new fees that are being imposed by major banks. You've called them shameless. We've had Bank of America, Citibank. It seems to me that government is frozen, and meantime the people are not only suffering because unemployment is so high, opportunities for work are so few, but in addition, we have big banks just hammering the public.
Well, it's true, and I think, you know, underlying a lot of the motivation, I think, of what's going on Wall Street now with the demonstrations is this sense that the financial sector is about the perpetuation of the financial sector. We need a strong financial sector, but traditionally in America, our banks, particularly our local banks, have lent money to folks who are trying to buy a home, small businesses that are trying to create a business. The new business model is that they exact fees any way that they can, including these $5 a month debit fees, and obviously there's a real frustration among average folks that, hey, we bailed these banks out, number one. Number two, they're back doing better than ever with bonuses higher than ever. And then they're ripping us off for these petty little fees, putting their hand in our pocket any way they can.
We're actually, as we speak, we're looking live at images from Lower Manhattan right now where protesters have been gathering. And this protest is no longer limited to this city. As you know, it's spreading right across the country. I guess people are beginning to rise up because they feel that the government that they elected, that they believed would represent them, is basically on holiday.
Well, it's worse than being on holiday. It's dysfunctional. I mean, look, we've got 9% unemployment. We've got 23 million Americans who are either totally out of a job or working part-time when they need to be working full-time. We've got a disparity of wealth that's getting wider, not narrower. And we obviously have to revive the American economy and restore the middle class. That's what has always been the strength of this country. And they're seeing the institutions basically argue in Congress about cutting the budget, about lowering taxes, particularly for the high-end folks, and not doing anything about job creation. And this inability of Congress to work together, I mean, we really do need more Frank Wolfs on the Republican side. And we need Democrats who are willing to work with them, because one of the things that will give folks some confidence is that we actually, A, make decisions, B, we do it together, we acknowledge that we don't get it right necessarily, or we don't get it perfect, but what we got wrong, we're willing to come back and try to make right. So we have got, this is absolutely urgent for the country that Congress start to function.
Pray God help you. Congressman Peter Welch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And all the recent talk about